Hi, Marianne. Excited to be with you again on Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm very happy to see you. I want to share something with our listeners that maybe they don't know is that we actually had the chance to meet in person
That's
a
right.
little while ago. So Christine and I have been working on the podcast for a couple of years. She's been in All's Authors for a while. And all this time we'd never been in each other's presence. So we did have the opportunity to meet in Manhattan
We
back
did.
in
That was
November.
so much fun. That was great.
Yeah, yeah. So that doesn't happen often. Everybody on the team is working virtually. And there's
Yeah.
only been a handful of times when some of us have gotten together in person. So it means a lot to us. So
Yeah. That was super cool. And the other super cool thing that's going on is this is our 10th anniversary year. So happy anniversary.
thank you so much. Remember when we started out, we thought this was going to be a 1 month project.
I know
And here
little
we
did you all
are.
know.
Yeah, little did you know, little did we know that 10 years later, we'd still not only be together, me and Jean and Vicky, but we would have this incredible team of authors and former caregivers to grow All's Authors into what it is right now. We have almost 400 authors in our collaborative. We have more than 400 resources for caregivers, and we are growing. We are
I
growing.
know.
Yeah, this is exciting, and we're going to have a lot of things planned throughout the year and celebrations. So please stay tuned. If you want to keep on top of it, join our newsletter. Visit our website at allsauthors.com, and you'll find where you can sign up for that, and you'll get the news in your inbox as soon as it comes out.
So that is so exciting. And what's cool is, growing into our 10th year, what is going to be new on the pod? Is anything new coming up for the podcast?
Oh, yeah, we've got a few new things coming up on the podcast that listeners may be wanting to know about up front. First of all, we're adding a couple of new elements to
Yeah.
our podcast for the author interviews. And one of which is we've invited the acquisitions editors to join us when we interview the authors that they have brought in to our
Yeah.
organization. So, what listeners might not know is that we have a team of acquisitions editors. These are all volunteers, they are all authors of books on caregiving related to their caregiving journey. So, they know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about. And they are the ones who work with the authors who apply to be in All's Authors.
Right.
So what they do is a very long process, and I'm not going to tell you all about it right now, but they're the ones who actually read the books and work with the
Hmm.
authors and get the authors blog post and coordinate all of that. And so because they know the books better than Christy or I,
Yeah.
they know the books deeply. They're coming on the podcast too, so that they can participate in the conversation and kind of steer our talk.
I
And
know. I love
really
this
excited about
idea.
that.
I think it's really cool and it's really great. And listeners, these books, these authors, we have an acquisitions editor who reads every word of every book that they bring in. And so these authors are all well vetted. We get more submissions than we can do in a year. So it's a pretty popular and prestigious organization for an author. So we're really excited about that. So I think that's cool. What else? What else is new for the pod?
Well, we are inundated with other people in dementia world in the care economy who want us to talk about what they are offering. May not be a book, or it may be one of our authors who's got something going on the side. And they want a little time with us on the podcast to share their information. So we're going to be doing little mini pods, maybe 5 or 10 minute interviews with these people so that they can get the message out about what they have to offer. So we're going to be talking about conferences. There's a conference coming up in March, the Exposed Dementia Conference in Maryland. We're going to be talking with the coordinator of that, C. Nathan Brown. We're going to invite Normus McNamara to come on the podcast to tell us about his World Walk for Alzheimer's coming up in September. So it's going to be things like that. And,
Cool.
and there may be some products involved as well that we have vetted because we vet everything. But we wanted to open up and give the listeners a few more resources that they may not get or they may not be aware of. So we're using the
Right.
podcast as well. So.
I love that because we're really our podcast is not just to shine a light on our authors, but it's really always in service of you, the listener, the caregivers out there who are, our motto is shine a light for others. So that's exactly what we're trying to do. And along that line, I know we do some really cool virtual events. What's coming up in terms of virtual events, Marianne?
Well, our first virtual event this year is going to be on February 18th at 2 p.m. And it's called The Long Haul, The Impact of Long-Term Dementia Caregiving.
Yeah,
And
gosh.
this is focusing on folks who have gone into a care journey, and like most people, unexpectedly or without preparation, and think it's going to be just for a little while, maybe a few months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. But these are people that have been in it for more than 10 years. And we're
Yeah.
talking about a decade of caregiving or more. So
Yeah.
we have a few of our authors coming in for that, which will include Loretta Woodward-Vini, who you may be familiar with as the Lego Lady. She incorporates Legos into dementia care. And we also have Jean Lee, who was a founder of All's Authors and author of Alzheimer's Daughter, and Ann Campanella, who is another one of our management team members who wrote Motherhood Lost and Found, her memoir of caring for her mother with dementia while she was trying to become a mother herself. And there may be a few others.
Yeah.
Oh, so that'll be again on Tuesday, February 18th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Zoom. So you can look forward to that. And we will
That's
be doing
cool.
probably 4 or 5 different of these presentations this year.
Yeah.
And the other thing, don't forget, is we do have our Books and Chit Chat Book Club with Aging and Amazing, which is the fourth Tuesday of every month. And that will also be at 2 o'clock. We changed the time. It was at 7 p.m. Now we're going to be at 2 p.m. And that's going to be coming up next February 25th. And that's going to be with Susan Landis, who is also a member of our team and is the author of In Search of Rainbows, her memoir of caring for her mother, although they had a very fractured relationship. And she's also written another book helpful to caregivers called Optimal Caregiving. And she is a nutritionist, and she used her background in nutrition to come up with that book. So that's more of a hands-on caregiver guide book. But her book club book, In Search of Rainbows, is a memoir.
Oh gosh, that's so great. I love our virtual events. Those will be really great.
And
We
all the
we
virtual events are recorded. They'll be on
yeah,
the podcast and they'll be on the YouTube channel. So if you can't make it, don't worry, you can catch up on it later.
absolutely, absolutely. But still register. We love to see you and hopefully you can join. Those are always so awesome. And we just have great guests. Like today's guest is I think we had such a rich conversation. It's really great. We're talking to Debra Hallisey, who wrote a couple books about caregiving. And how did you feel about this? This was great, wasn't it wonderful? I feel like I learned a lot.
Yeah, Deborah has a wealth of information to share, and she is one who took her caregiving experience for her mom, and it was at her mother's suggestion, by the way, because mother knows best. And instead of going back to her corporate job or corporate world, where she made her career for many years, she decided to dive into the care economy and uses her skills and talents and her experience to train caregivers on best practices
Yeah,
and to make their journey survivable and thrivable. So she has
yeah.
a lot to tell us,
And
and she's
she
very optimistic and very enlightening.
Yeah, and her first book was Your Caregiver Relationship Contract. So she talks about a relationship contract, which I think is a wonderful concept. And then she is going to talk a lot today also about her relationship contract for dementia caregivers. So she focused her perspective on people who are on a caregiving journey for someone with dementia because she does a lot of support groups for people who are caring for someone with dementia. So, really, our listeners, I think, are going to get a lot out of this episode.
Yeah, I'm excited
Great.
for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get to it. It'll be great.
Awesome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, and we are so excited to be here with you today. Hi, Marianne. How you doing? It's great to have you here too, my co-host.
Yes, I'm doing great and happy to have a new podcast guest who is
Yeah.
Debra Hallisey. And she is the author of, what's the name of the book, Deborah?
A relationship contract for dementia caregivers.
Okay.
It's
And
excellent.
we also have with us today Malia Klein, who
Hi,
is the
good
author
to be here. Thanks for having me.
Malia is the author of Sisterly Shove. And she's here because she's the acquisitions editor who introduced Debra Hallisey to All's authors. So a little bit on how that works. All of our books are carefully vetted. We are not a site where we just grab books on dementia and put them up on our website. No, we invite the author to submit a very lengthy submission form as to why we should consider their book. And then one member of our acquisitions team will get the book and read it and review it and make sure that it meets all of our criteria, which is lengthy. All of this is available on our website. I think it's on the contact page, and submit your book if you're interested. And so then we determine whether or not the book is a fit. So I will admit that about 60% of the books considered are actually in the collection. So Malia is the one who found out about Deborah's book and read the book and invited her to join All's authors. So Malia, what
Yeah,
was it about Deborah's book that made you think it belonged in our collection?
well, she was so knowledgeable. Not only she knew, the whole subject in depth. Her mother had dementia or Alzheimer's, and so she wasn't like me. I was, just a person who my father had it. So, and my relationship with my sister was the focus of my book. But Deborah was different in that she was not. My book's very emotional. It's very emotional. It's about things that happen between family members. She had a level of specificity that just really appealed to me. If I had had this book when I was starting the journey, I could have done such a better job, because it's very specific in terms of giving you exercises, just where do I go? How do I deal with this, rather than being emotional, being horrified, being whatever I was. So, and I just thought that, when I first picked it up, I thought, what is a relationship contract? I mean, that was my first question. And some people out there might be asking the same question. So Deborah defines a relationship contract as an informal, often unspoken. You don't write it down. It's not signed by people. It's unspoken, and it just is built around what are we willing to do or not do for each other in the confines of this relationship. How do we support each other? How far are we willing to go? And it's just an unwritten thing you have really with everybody in your life. And it's something I never thought about before. And certainly I never had with my siblings. We were just like going crazy and reacting and emotionally reacting. And so anyway, I'll say one more thing and then we'll let Deborah or one of you talk. But I loved the thing that struck me the most when I picked it up was her dedication. This book, I'll read it to you, is dedicated to the millions of dementia family caregivers who step into their person's reality, and in doing so, allow them to feel safe and loved. So, to me, the idea of this contract for dementia caregivers is all about reality, because the reality is off of the map. The it's the reality of how your person used to be, how your family members used to relate, what they expected at holidays and other times. And it's just the reality of how dementia changes everyone in the picture's lives. And that grabbed me right off the bat. So
Wow. That's
That's
a wonderful
great. Yeah.
synopsis. I love that. And Deborah, welcome to All's Authors Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia podcast. We're so happy to have you here. And please tell us a little more about your dementia journey and how you came to write this book.
Absolutely. And thank you, first of all, for accepting the book. That is such an honor. I truly, truly appreciate it. And then thank you for having me on the podcast. So it's interesting. I I wrote a book before this called Your Relationship Contract, A Relationship Contract. And that came out of what I learned as my mom's caregiver. And then a colleague and a friend who is very much in the dementia world as an educator said to me, you know, this book really works for dementia family caregivers as well with some tweaks. And so we sat down and we kind of mapped it out, and I rewrote the book specifically for dementia family caregivers. So I owe a debt of gratitude to her. I really, really do. And I owe a debt of gratitude to my clients who are dementia family caregivers and the dementia family caregiver support group families that I've met along the way. Their willingness to be vulnerable and to share their stories and to just really tell it like it is so impactful for every other caregiver. And I appreciate that they're willing to be so honest with me.
That's great. That's great. I love the idea of a relationship contract. And, just can you talk a little bit about how you sort of found your way to that, to kind of understanding, in many ways, it sounds a lot like finding your boundaries and being able to establish them, own them, and then strategize from that place. So could you talk a little bit about how you kind of found your way into understanding relationship contract?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So, in all honesty, and I say this in the book, my mother and I struggled when I was growing up. I was very close to my dad, and we struggled. And when I became my mother's caregiver, I quickly realized that if I was not careful, we were going to blow this relationship up. And the aha moment came for me when my dad was in the hospital and I had moved back home to care for my mom. And, in all the craziness of going to the hospital, caring for her, still trying to work, there was a routine. I recognized that my mom and dad had a routine at nighttime that was part of their unspoken relationship contract, right? My mom was diabetic and legally blind. So he would put her eye drops in, he would take her blood, give her something to eat if she needed it, and then carry her toothbrush and her toothpaste from the bathroom to the kitchen so she could sit down and do that because she had mobility issues. Go into the bedroom, put the blinds down, put the clothes out, give her water, all these things. And by the time we were going to bed, I had it. I was exhausted. And I just kind of realized that I could not keep up with the way my mom and dad had been working through their evening routine. And that was the first moment that I was like, okay, this is this unspoken agreement that they have. And I can't keep up with it. And that's okay. We need to create a different one. So I asked my mother if we could take the toothbrush and the toothpaste and put it in the kitchen so she could get it. And she said yes. And that was the beginning of kind of redefining and, like you said, setting boundaries, and that's very much a part of this, setting boundaries and asking for help. So that was like this weird aha moment, along with saying, you need to forge a different relationship or you're going to blow this up. And so that's how it started.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
I think I went through that too, with my mom and having to rearrange her whole life when her husband went to the nursing home because he was the one with the dementia, but she required care too. And there were like a lot of concessions that she had to make. Things couldn't go on the way that they had before, and that's hard. That's a big challenge in caring, and it's hard to give that up, it's on the part of the person whose life has been changed, whose routine has changed.
Yeah.
Little thing.
And
Yeah.
I know you work with a lot of caregivers and caregiver groups. And, when I talk to folks, it feels, and I know I felt like this too. It's kind of like being in quicksand, right? You're walking along and then suddenly you're sinking down and you're like, oh my God, I'm sinking. And I don't know how to get out of this. And you struggle and struggle until you finally realize I'm in quicksand. This is not normal. I need to do something different, And it's because there are a lot of people, and I don't know if you experienced this, Deborah, but that they would not define themselves as a caregiver, even though many of the things they're doing are caregiving activities. And so until you can really identify yourself and say, yeah, this is where I am. And then, like you said, the contract, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. And there's so many reasons why, and they're all valid. I mean, there's so many things.
And
Anyway.
that becomes particularly important culturally,
Hmm.
because
Yes.
Hispanics and North Asian, North Indians, that is such a part of their. The first book is actually also in Spanish, and
Great.
we had to rewrite the title because there was no word in Spanish for family caregiver.
Hmm.
Right.
Just tell you culturally how embedded it is for them.
Oh, 100%. I find the same thing with the term sandwich generation. I live in a very diverse community, and there are so many people in my neighborhood who they wouldn't even identify with that. They're like, of course I have my parents and my children together, and of course I'm doing both. And what do you mean? What are you
Yeah.
talking about? Not that they don't have similar struggles, they just would not identify that as a problem. It's like, but that's what families do. So 100% cultural.
Yeah, and that's the problem. When you don't identify, you don't ask for help. And you
Right.
don't realize the need to set boundaries, and maybe even more importantly, you don't realize that you have the right to set boundaries.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's a matter of with the other cultural sensitivities, are we too self-centered? I mean, is it how is this caregiving label going to impact my life and what people think of me? And is it so female related that that's an image that maybe those of us who grew up in the 60s and 70s, that's a tough pill to swallow because we had this other vision.
Hmm.
I mean, I know that sounds harsh and self-centered, but maybe the fact that an entire family is involved makes a difference in the perceptions of whether people are willing to identify as a caregiver.
I agree. I agree with you. I think part of what separates culturally is we don't necessarily live next to our family of origin. Like many people have changed cross country for whatever reason, right? Or our parents have moved to Florida or something to retire. So I think culturally we're not always in proximity, which absolutely makes this even harder. But I also think that culturally, our parents have a very real need to be independent and not feel like a burden. I think the hardest thing for a caregiver is when you know a parent needs help and you're willing to do it, or a spouse, but they're saying no. Like, where do you go with that, right? Because you know that they need help. And then the other part of that is you're thinking, well, great, get on that ladder. When you fall, it's going to be me to take care of you, right? I mean, let's be honest about this. There's that part as well. But I think that proximity and just in general, the nature of us as Americans, North Americans, are one of we're independent and we don't want to be a burden.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many angles we could look at, and I think Malia, you bring up a really great point too, and I resonate with what you're saying, Deborah, about the burden thing. With kids don't want to disappoint their parents. That is a driver of a lot of things. I just don't want to be a disappointment, and then at some point, then but our elders are like, I don't want to be a burden, and this thing of I'm just going to keep doing these. I can't see out of one eye, and my mobility is not great, but I'm going to keep driving because I really don't want to ask for help. And it's like, do you understand that when you have that accident, that's going to make things a lot worse for me?
No, I know. Oh gosh, I know. And yet, and you can sort of say that, but you have to be careful. I remember my mom saying to me, I just don't want to be a burden. And I said, Mom, you're not a burden. You're a challenge. You're not a burden. Don't even think that way. So,
Yeah.
and I can say 8 years through caregiving, we really became a team in a way I never expected. And I'm so grateful for that. So
Yeah.
grateful for that.
Yeah. I'm curious too, as a care economy professional out there doing the work you're doing, and then you wrote a previous book about the relationship contract, and you said you got some feedback that this would be great for dementia caregivers. What do you think is maybe stands out differently in this book that you think is very specific to people caring for someone with dementia?
So the first book is all about renegotiating that unspoken contract, right? And I'm very clear in the book that in that very beginning, in that mild stage, you can have that negotiation. And the things to concentrate on is how do they want to live out their life going forward? And that's not just the legal documents, but, do you want to go out to dinner as often? How do you want to live out your life, right? And that's a little hard to say because you don't know what's happening. But if you know that they would like to continue to play cards, you can continue to do that, but there comes a point where who really cares what the rules are for Go Fish? Like, just let it go. It doesn't matter, right? But where the break is that after that mild stage, the caregiver relationship contract is really with yourself. You need to have a self-care plan for yourself that includes setting boundaries, asking for help, and recognizing how emotional this journey is and giving yourself grace around that. I always say to people, grief runs through caregiving like a river, and we are never allowed to talk about it because the person is still alive. And we need to be able to voice it, own it, because it's not the tasks. I mean, don't get me wrong. The tasks are exhausting. But for me, it wasn't the task. It was the emotions tied to the tasks that were really the things that were making me sick.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that struck me too, Deborah, and the fact you talked about grief surfaces long before your carrie dies. And you talk about ambiguous loss, and you talk about anticipating grief and lessons learned. And, all of those things are just such great information, again, that I never wrapped my head around. So I think this idea of grief is an important one.
100%, because especially about dementia, there is such grief from the very beginning and the anticipation of that. And every day, not every day, but certainly more often in that you're looking at this person and thinking that's one more loss. And it's a loss for them, and it's a loss for you. Because the more losses they have, the narrower your world gets. And that's one of the things about having a relationship contract with yourself, is putting things in place that make sure it doesn't become so narrow that you don't have a life.
Yeah. Really, really good. I wanted to ask a couple other questions. So if someone said to you, and you probably have this in the work that you do, my loved one has dementia, or the person, a parent, someone I care about has dementia, what would be your first response?
My first response was, don't keep it a secret, right? Because a dementia diagnosis is what used to be cancer.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody whispered about cancer. And the problem with keeping that a secret is you never get the opportunity to put your support network in place. Now, I know that unfortunately there is such shame around that diagnosis for the person who has been given it, that they may feel very strongly that they don't want anybody to know, right? But this is where in that early stage, you can kind of negotiate and say, I know this is really hard for both of us. I know you don't want to put this out on Facebook, but I have to tell you, I need to tell one person, just one. So I have a release valve. And that to me is something that I think is really critical, especially right after the diagnosis. And then the other thing I would say is just be aware how much grief is going to be a part of this. And that however you deal with that, talking to that one person, journaling, being part of a Facebook group, whatever that is one of the emotions that I think sometimes the anger and the frustration come out, but the real underlying emotion is grief. And if we can talk about that, write about that, whatever it is, and release that, you're better able to manage those other emotions. So the fact that don't keep it a secret, tell at least one person, recognize that this is much more an emotional journey than in many ways it's a task-driven journey. And the biggest emotion you need to be aware of is grief.
Yeah, and also, yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for saying that. I love the, being open about it, or at least, not keeping it a secret. But on the grief thing, the other element around grief, it's not one element, but grief shows up in a lot of different ways. We think grief, we think, oh, you're sitting around crying all the time. Grief shows up as anger. It shows up as irritability. It shows up as denial. It shows up as avoidance. And it shows up as extreme sadness and anxiety, all kinds of things. And so recognizing that grief is not just I'm crying. Grief is a lot of things that impact you. And how do you get the support you need for that? Because I think the grief process is absolutely, like you said, I love it, the river that runs through it all. And it is, and then that impacts other relationships you have. So that's really great advice. Very good. Thank you.
Grief is not only about you're grieving your loved person who is ill and experiencing their own personal losses, but grief over your own losses, perhaps, in the way that it has impacted your lifestyle and your relationships and your dreams and goals and ideals and how you live. I mean, we have some caregivers who packed up their houses and moved to another state to take care of their loved one, gave up everything.
Right.
And that's something to be mournful of too. And a lot of people may think that it's selfish to be upset or grieving because you had to give up, your card game or your book club because you just don't have time for it anymore. But those are real losses. People need to recognize that.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of realized at some point, fairly early on, that much of the resentment that my life has changed profoundly and will never be the same, was the grief that my plans to move out of New Jersey, because it's so expensive, right, were gone for the foreseeable future, because there's no way I could have moved my mom for her support system. My plans to go to Italy were on hold, maybe forever. And that came out as resentment, that sharp answer when somebody says something, or, you don't necessarily put the glass down gently when you are giving someone what they're drinking for dinner, right? The most profound thing I want dementia caregivers to know is one of the reasons you have to deal with the emotions and the grief is because as this disease progresses, your words mean nothing, but your body language, the slamming of the glass because you're frustrated, the look on your face, right? That is what they're reacting to. And if they act out, it's because they're seeing underneath the words everything that's going on. And it's so important to recognize those emotions so that you can have the body language that's important and positive for them as well.
Yeah, and the self-care you talk about is so important because all of those feelings you're feeling, the resentment, the grief, all of that is absolutely valid and real. But, we're not, I would never recommend to somebody suppress all those feelings and just put on a happy face. It's like you called it, a release valve. Find your place to be able to do that, to talk about it, to let it go, to let off your steam, or just confront it, because not only is your person impacted by all those, the body language, the tone of voice, it's all the people around you too, right? Children, friends, spouses,
Yeah.
siblings. It radiates. It's that pebble you throw into the water. What kind of waves do you want to make for everybody? You know, but that doesn't mean you don't have those feelings or that you're wrong to have those feelings. They're real and they're completely valid, and so you're not wrong or bad to feel that way. It's just how are you that's where self-care I think comes in, and we talk about self-care so much these days and people are getting tired of it, and yet we all need more of it.
Well, I think, I think of the chapter on emotions starts out, I'm old enough to remember George Carlin and the seven things you couldn't say on TV, right? And so
Yeah.
I talk about the seven deadly emotions: anger, resentment, frustration, guilt, whatever. But once you recognize that, you can move from that emotion to a more positive one, right? So, one of the examples I give in the book was my mom used to put the dishes away at night, which basically meant she could put away the silverware because she could reach it, and everything else was on the kitchen table when I got up in the morning and I had to deal with it before I could do anything. And that used to drive me crazy. And then I said, okay, I need to look at this through a different lens. I'm so grateful my mother can still contribute to our family in the best way she can.
Yeah.
And if you can identify those emotions and flip the lens, that is part of self-care for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
That's a really important point too, and the idea of communication. I know in the book, this also stood out to me. You feature 5 stories of 5 different families and caregiving situations, and then after you go through their stories, which I like a lot because a lot of books feature, one particular situation, but you go through and you draw out lessons learned from the 5 families, and I like that a lot. First thing you touched on a minute ago was denial is not a good strategy because it keeps you from doing needed planning. Um, Also, changing the environment. I heard my brother talking about this the other day with his mother-in-law, and she does not have dementia or Alzheimer's, but he was talking about just changing the floor, having to redo her tile or whatever, so she didn't slide or fall or whatever. But in this situation with a more compromised person, changing the environment means changing the way you communicate by breaking down processes and funding new ones. So it's a whole different thing. And your communication with your spouse is another thing you deal with, is Deborah, that you can't ignore your marriage and you have to be on the same page with your children. Those are the kind of specifics I talked about in the beginning. And another thing, children know when the person is acting differently. I know my daughter did. And so keeping them with age appropriate conversations is another one of these specifics that the book really brings out, and it's great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So I know you say you cared for your mom for 8 years. Is that what you said? Yeah, 8 years.
Yeah.
Were you prepared to be a caregiver when you look
Oh,
back on
God,
your
no.
life? Okay.
No, I don't think any of us are. I mean, I'm the only girl. There's only 2 of us. I'm the only girl. I'm the youngest. My brother lives 12 hours away. So did I know this was going to be my job? 100%. Was I prepared? No. Not mentally. I can remember when 2 weeks my dad was in the hospital and we didn't know if he'd come home. I would lie in bed and think, where do I start? Where do I start? Right?
Mhm.
I don't think anybody is prepared. And I think it's so interesting because there's a statistic that I heard at one point that, you've got 9 months to plan for a baby, usually a year for a plan for a wedding. And most people become a caregiver in 9 minutes. It's one diagnosis. You have Alzheimer's. That is, your dad had a stroke, right? Whatever that is. And so, very few of us are prepared, even if we are anticipating that it's going to be what we're needing to do. But even the anticipation did not set me up for how profoundly my life was going to change. And what that meant to me and to my friends, you know, and to other people in my life, because those relationships are picked as well. You know, I think the one thing about a dementia is it's so easy to do a Monday quarterback. Oh, this happened, I see this, that. Don't beat yourself up about that, right? Like you can Monday morning quarterback to the end of days, but that guilt does not serve you. And this is where you are. So let's take the reality and move on. And once you're in that reality, there's so many resources from all authors and from different, you know, websites and people and Facebook groups that can help you to, for example, Teepa Snow. I tell everybody about Teepa Snow and watching her videos and understanding how communication has to change. And are you going to be good at it at the very beginning? Oh, no. You may never get great at it, but every incremental change you make has such a profound impact, not only on the person you're caring for, but on your own life as well. Because the more safe they feel, the more loved they feel, the less you're going to get the acting out behavior. Hopefully, not always, not every case is the same, but hopefully.
So you've given us 2 books to date, and you did mention earlier that you are in the process of writing a third, which is about your experiences with assisted living. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So my mom was in our family home for 7 years, 8 years with full-time live-in care. I live about an hour away. When I first became her full-time caregiver, I was still traveling for work, and it just worked well for us for that to happen. So, you know, I understand that. And then the pandemic hit. Several things happened, and my health started to deteriorate. And because my mother and I, and this goes back to secrets, when my dad first died and my mother said, I don't want to leave this house, I never promised her she wouldn't. What I said to her was, Mommy, I will keep you in this house as long as I can, but you need to keep strong, because if you need a wheelchair full time, you can't stay here. Right. And so we had multiple conversations. So when I went to her and I said, Mom, we have to figure out something different. You know, my health is being affected. She immediately said, your health is not worth it. Let's talk about me moving, which, oh my God, what an act of love, right, for me. And that just, it's one of the, it's an amazing gift that she gave me. And so, you know, what it's really all about is, what was best for her? Assisted living. Well, what does that mean? What do you get out of it? What do you pay? What does it mean for Medicaid? So there's all of that explaining that, right? And then we had to sell a home that she was in for 63 years. And we wanted to sell it quickly because I didn't want to pay New Jersey property taxes while she wasn't living in it. So what did we decide to do about that, right? And then once she got there, how did I acclimate her to the environment? And how did I acclimate them to her? And then also, what did I learn about that along the way? So I will tell you that, you know, one of the truths is, no one will ever care for your person the way you will. No one. And you need to reconcile yourself to that, because for whatever reason, you made this decision and it was the right one. And then the second thing is, if you thought you were an advocate before, you are even more of an advocate once they move into some kind of community, whether it's assisted living or memory care. That job does not end. I think the thing that was so interesting to me, there's a term called grief relief, which is where typically somebody dies and you feel the grief, but you also feel relief. I felt that when my mother moved into assisted living. And as a dementia family caregiver, you may feel the same if they move into memory care. You may feel the same if they go to adult day several times a week. There is grief in not being able to be the single person. but there is such relief that you're not the only one that's responsible anymore. And then comes the guilt. Let go of the guilt. Let go of the guilt. So, you know, and it's interesting because being in this space, there's some, I hope some interesting insights. So I'll give you one example. You know, when we did the interview, mom said, I don't go to bed early. They're like, whatever time you want to go to bed, you can go to bed. I mean, they promise you the world, and then you hit county, state, and national laws. And there are some things I just can't do. And so about 10:30, my mother would ring the bell to get changed, and thoroughly frustrated because nobody was coming. I'd wind up calling and say, could you please go see my mother? And then all of a sudden I went, 10:30, 11, shift change. They're not going to get anybody. And I said, Mom, can you call at 10 to be changed? And then when you want to go to bed, call again? Solved it. But that's an insight, I think, because I work in the industry, other people may not have. So I'm trying to build those things as well in there.
Yeah, that's that. I think you're spot on about you become even more of an advocate when you have to interact with other agencies and care systems. But yeah, navigation, it's a lot. It's a lot of work. And yeah, really insightful. Thank you for that. And I guess I do want to hear more about what do you wish people who maybe have never encountered anyone with dementia, what do you wish they knew about the disease?
I wish they knew that their person is still in there. You may have to dig a little deeper, but they are still in there. And if you could let go of your expectation that they are going to be the person you knew 5, 10, a year ago, and lean into who they are now, there's actually a lot of joy in that. Like, you don't think about it, but there can be a lot of laughter in this dementia journey. Like, some of the things that get said, you're just like, really? I mean, you have to laugh. And if you laugh, they laugh. You know, that person is still in there. Give them grace, give yourself grace, find ways to bring joy into this. And, you know, expectations, like we talked about this earlier, they're gonna continue to play cards. No, maybe you move to a different card game, or maybe you move to just letting go of all of the rules, right? And the other thing I would say, they're really not trying to aggravate you, right? Like, I know there's a lot of relationships, particularly, you know, mother-daughter, maybe mother-son, where there's been friction in the past. And the simple fact that they've got a dementia diagnosis does not mean that they're going to change the behavior that drove you crazy in the past. But they're not trying to drive you crazy. This really is the disease. And the more you can know about that, the better off you are. But don't read a book and expect your journey to be the same. Just kind of try and understand what the process can possibly be, with the understanding that it's different for everyone. So that's what I would say to them.
Yeah. And we've talked a little bit about self-care, and I think in the contract with yourself, that concept is so powerful. And can you talk a little bit about how, because many of us walk in, like you said, 9 minutes, then suddenly we're a caregiver. And we may not have had a great relationship to a relationship contract with ourselves previous to this, that is steeped in, you know, knowing your boundaries, you know, what is my contract with myself? What do I want? What don't I want? How would you, like, what do you think are some of the most effective self-care strategies that someone might want to investigate once they come to this understanding of, well, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing?
I consider centering boundaries and asking for and saying yes to help the foundation of self-care. Period. Stop. Because without doing both, you don't get to go to dinner. You don't get to have the mani-pedi, or what, you know, whatever people say that you should be doing. So setting boundaries. And so one of the things, well, it's interesting because my work has morphed into a lot of effective family communications work, right? And so one of the things, the chapter on boundaries is very clear about being careful of language, not using the you never, you should, you don't, but it's I language, right? It's an I statement and then an expression of concern. And so when I go back and think about the discussion with my mom about changing something in our routine for nighttime, the conversation I had with her was not at night. It was in a neutral place where we were both in a good mood. And I said to her, Mommy, I'm really overwhelmed and exhausted by everything that needs to happen at night. I know this is what you and Dad used to do, but if we could change one thing, it would help me. Where can we put the toothbrush and the toothpaste? And that ending of that conversation is the most important, because you never want to ask something where they can say yes or no. You want it to be two choices or an open-ended question. So practicing that and setting boundaries in that way, I found to be very, very helpful. And then when we talk about asking for and saying yes to help, make a list. We all talk about that, but make that list as specific as you possibly can. Because saying to someone, can you walk the dog, is very different from saying, can you walk the dog Tuesdays and Thursdays between 5 and 7? Because then you have the room to negotiate. Can't do Tuesdays. I can't start at 5. I could do 6, right? Because what I discovered, if you ask somebody to do something and you're not specific, they may do it once and then they're no longer to do it again. And when you ask them, I want you to be actively listening. Because when I asked my cousin to go visit my dad in the hospital so I could have lunch with my mom and get her ready for the day, I listened to her response and I said, Sue, what's going on? She said, well, since Dad had cancer, I'm not good in the hospitals. I said, no problem. You come here, you clean out the drawer my mother has been driving me crazy that she wants to clean out, have lunch with her, and I'll go back to the hospital. So, there are definite strategies that you can use to kind of do that. And then I think that's the most important thing. The other thing I will say about that is you have the right to set boundaries, adult to adult, even with parents. Even with parents. Don't let that old relationship get in the way. And I would say, we don't talk about this, but so often there's sibling things that go on. Every child has a different childhood. I don't care if there's 2 or 10. And what you expect them or want them to do may be something they can't because of what happened in the childhood that you did not have. So let it go. You've got your family of origin and you've got your family of choice. And if your family of origin can't do it, let it go and go to somebody in your family of choice.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that. That is really so brilliant, and the notion that every child in a family has a unique childhood experience. We may have the same parents, the same house, the same dog, the same cat, whatever. We had different lives, and it's just really hard sometimes if you feel like your sibling isn't validating your experience. And it's important for people to consider that. That's not something we talk about very often. So that's really great that you bring that out. That's great.
It's not, and the other thing I always say to people is don't take on other people's stuff.
Right, right.
You have enough of your own.
That's right.
You are going to get opinions from everybody who is not living the life you need, and you don't have to give them credence. You don't. I remember a friend saying to me, your brother should come up more often and help you. And I looked at her and I thought, that's your stuff because your siblings aren't stepping up. I know my brother lives 12 hours away and I know he's not in good health, and I'm completely okay with how he's helping me.
Yeah.
So you can listen, but don't take it on.
Right. It's learning to let go of the shoulding, right? You don't want to should on yourself and you don't need to should on others.
Absolutely. I love Elizabeth Miller, how she says that to me all the time. Don't should on yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Thank you for so much for, joining us today and having this very informative conversation. Can you just tell us a little bit about your consulting work and your Advocate for Mom and Dad website and where people can find it?
Sure, sure. So I work with families, and in the beginning it was mostly resources, but that really has morphed into effective family communication. And I also work with people on grief, both when they're in the process and after someone has passed. You can reach me. My website has all the contact information. It's called Advocate for Mom and Dad, completely spelled out. So there's 2 D's. It's a long thing to type out. I am sorry. But you can find me there. There's links to the book there, both books there. Or you can find me on Amazon just by putting my name in. The books are in print, ebook, and audio. All of them. So whatever works best for you. Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that has been my complete joy over this last year is I want to introduce people, if they don't know them, to Kitty Norton's document, Wine, Women, and Dementia.
Yes.
Okay. So
He's an author, by the way.
they're wonderful, right? So I was able to bring 5 viewings of that to New Jersey in 5 different communities last year. And I'm very proud to say I am one of the sponsors for the PBS version of
Oh,
Wine, Women, and Dementia.
wonderful.
I so believe in what she says. If until there is a cure, there is a community. And so if you don't know anything about it, I urge you to go out the website, Wine, Women, and Dementia. She's constantly updating what PBS channels are there. You can look at it PBS online. I just think she's amazing. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. It's an amazing documentary. It's lighthearted. Many of the folks are past their caregiving journey, so they have perspective. It's a little different, but at least Kitty and one of the others that she visits, Roseanne Corcoran, they are also members of those authors, contributors. So we're really excited for Kitty.
Yeah, yeah. She's just a force to be reckoned with.
And I'm hoping we get to do a screening here for All's Authors as well. So
wonderful. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
year, get to that. We want to do more film screenings.
Yeah. 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 I'm so proud to be attached to what she's doing and help in any way that I can.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It was a joy to meet you and to hear your story and everything that you have to offer caregivers. And I encourage everyone listening or watching to take the moment to visit your website, advocateformomanddad.com, and to check out your books about the relationship contract, which are very important reads. And I thank you. And I thank you for being a contributor to All's Authors, Deborah.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to reach out to more people and to be a part of what I think is an amazing organization and what you guys do. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I thank you too, Malia, for being
Yeah.
here today and for bringing the book to our attention and adding it to our extensive collection of over 400 quality resources for Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers.
Yeah. It's great to have you in the family.
Thank you. Yeah.
So welcome. And it
is a family.
And it's great to spend time with you. Thank you so much. It's been very informative. I love it. And nice to see you again, Malia.
You
And
too. Everybody have a great day. And as Deborah says, relationships are a dance. One partner changes the dance and the others can adapt or stop dancing. I say dance away.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Hi, it's Mary Ann with exciting news. All's Authors has published a brand new anthology, Poetry for the Dementia Journey, now available in ebook and paperback through Amazon. Within its pages, you'll discover a variety of voices writing about the diversity of dementia care experiences, caring for a mother or father or spouse, witnessing the decline of a sibling, reflections on the time before the diagnosis, the years of care, and the aftermath. Poetry provides us with a meaningful way to explore our experience and emotions regarding dementia and to express ourselves when we encounter the many different joys and dilemmas caregiving can bring. You'll find details on how to order the book in the show notes. Please remember to leave a review on the book sales page once you've read it. Reviews do help boost a book's visibility and helps readers find it. Thank you for your support of our efforts to erase the silence and stigma that often accompany a dementia diagnosis.
Caregiving is a challenge, whether your person has dementia or not. Finding helpful tips and learning new strategies from people in the know is critical. That's why we at Owls Authors love the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast from Elizabeth Miller, who also happens to be an Owls author. Elizabeth speaks from experience and has important and often fun conversations with other caregiving experts and professionals. And we appreciate learning tips on self-care, discovering new resources, and feeling empowered to support ourselves as caregivers. You can find the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast wherever you download your favorite podcasts, or visit the website happyhealthycaregiver.com.